Welcome back to Bread and Butter, everybody, where we are serving up the basics for Hearthstone improvement. I am Tito. Tonight, Doc was not able to be with us, but we have our returning guest. I believe this is the 5th or 6th time. I'm starting to lose track, but welcome, Dragonrider. Dawn, how are you?
Hello, I am doing pretty well. And I think this is 6, 7, maybe if we count the Doctor 3 crossover episode we did. So yeah, it's going well. I'm excited to be back. Thank you again for having me as a returning guest.
Oh, it's our pleasure. It's always good to talk fundamentals with somebody so good at them. What have you been doing inside Hearthstone this week, or actually for the last few weeks, whatever?
Last few weeks. Yeah, let's talk about that. So inside of Hearthstone, I have been playing a bit of ladder and practicing some battlegrounds. But most of my time while I'm in the game actually has been going to competitive matches, because I am playing in as are you. We're both playing in the Battlegrounds World League on some different teams that's going on. So I've been playing most weeks for that. And then I am also doing 4 different series in THL in Team Hearth League. So got almost 5 matches that I play every week. So a lot of my time is definitely going to playing those matches.
And haven't we talked about overdoing things before?
Yes, consistently.
Yes. I thought we were going to play each other this week. I think so. Our teams, I believe, will play each other this season. So looking forward to that. We just played Doc's team, Swagali, and we took it with the very last match, which was nice. But I have been, I played Edel this week, actually, in THL in the match. So we were talking about, and I had been practicing, like I mentioned, the dancing paladin that she had been talking about in Coin Concede, and then I found out I was playing her, and then I was kind of debating, do I bring it, do I not bring it? I brought it. And the matchup spread I had versus the deck she was bringing, I was under 50% all those matchups. But I ended up playing, I lost 2-3, and I saved the paladin deck for last, and I was not able to beat her with her own deck, which was would have been a lot of fun and enjoyable, but they were good series. It was fun. It's the first time I've ever beat her, so I'm pretty happy about that. And right now I'm just trying to find the deck to climb with, to get to Legend before I play Twist. I try to not I don't try to do other modes except for some Battlegrounds until I hit the Legend, and we got up to about D3, but then we've kind of fallen off a little bit, so we're struggling to figure that out, but we'll get there. But how about outside of the game? What have you been up to?
Oh gosh, it feels like a lot. So I guess I'm going to start, because I think this kind of leads into my other things. So you were like, we got to make sure we talk about the Masters Tour,
yes,
and
the
fact that I casted the last Masters Tour. So yes, that was several weeks ago at this point, as we're recording this. But yeah, I did cast the Summer Championship Masters Tour, which was awesome. I did cast 1 day of a Masters Tour, and I casted basically a 1 day of just the America's Grandmasters, both of those back in 2021. So it's been quite a while, but I was very excited to be invited back to cast, and I casted, during the whole couple of days of the Masters Tour this time. But it was awesome, and I love casting. I love getting to talk about the game, even doing podcasts and getting to analyze stuff and break things down like we do for this is fantastic. So, that was a really great experience, and it was cool to see that. Plus, I think in terms of the meta and the decks that all of the players brought, it was a pretty varied meta in terms of the tournament. Even though there was some crossover, but even, players who brought maybe 3 of the same deck, their 4th deck was different, and then they banned slightly differently, and their card choices were slightly different. So it was really cool to get to see that, and not just have like a tournament that kind of felt all the same. Like it wasn't all the same lineup. It wasn't all just the same deck. So that felt pretty cool.
Yeah, and there was some Naga Mage too, which was fun.
Yeah. There was a good mix of stuff. And that was pretty interesting. It was really cool. That's so hard to cast too. Like on some of the turns where they just go, there's so much happening. Too many cards are being played. Too many like discover choices. It's so hard to cast those turns. You're like, basically, we just sit back and watch the player go because like you can't keep up with what's going on.
You got to work on your auctioneer skills.
Oh, so yeah, okay.
Yeah, you got to be able to.
I see. That would be pretty cool. That would be kind of a fun, entertaining little thing. Maybe I should try that. When I gotta learn that skill.
That could at least be maybe like a YouTube where you overcast something and talk really fast with the auctioneer kind of pacing. Yeah. But you didn't just cast Masters Tour. You cast the finals. How was it casting the final game that night?
I did cast the actual like grand finals of the event. It was pretty sweet. I do want to just shout out and like thank the other casters there. They kind of were the ones that were like, we all kind of got to decide like who was going to cast what and do all that and kind of create our own like rotation. And they gave me the opportunity to actually cast that grand finals. So I'm really appreciative of that. And I was kind of hoping that Pocket Train was going to win and not take second, because if he were to have won, we're going to do a winner's interview. So that was unfortunate, you know. It was like, oh, I didn't get to do an interview with him. But that's okay, because then I got to actually interview him on my other podcast. So it worked out.
Very nice.
But yeah. But casting the finals was kind of interesting because there was a lot of storylines that were happening, it felt like. So, you know, we kind of had seen everything the whole tournament. We had seen both of those players on stream a couple of times already. And I think for Gyu specifically, we really got to see like him play differently in some of the matches throughout the tournament. So that it was really cool. I got to, you know, cast a couple of those, and just to see his demeanor and kind of how he played and his focus and, you know, kind of that change throughout the tournament was really cool. And to be able to cast that and like have that storyline was nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch, and you did a fantastic job. So I hope they keep bringing you back, and look forward to seeing you casting those in the future. I also look forward to doing our things again in the future, even if we've kind of taken a little bit of a hiatus from the fight nights. They'll be back, and we'll have some fun with that.
Yeah, but I will say though that casting and the work that I put in to prepare for that was very exciting for me. I know that sounds weird, like right, the preparing for it, but like I spent like a full week and a half before that, just like literally taking a bunch of notes, preparing, like creating like charts for myself, all sorts of stuff, and then getting to cast and just share that knowledge got me very excited. And I love card games in general, not just Hearthstone. So that has kind of led me to, outside of Hearthstone, also kind of wanting to like learn and focus on some other card games and how I might approach maybe some notes and really like focus on learning and trying to cast some other card games in the future too, which is very kind of a big focus, I would say. But I'm very excited. There's some card games that have been coming out, like Disney Lorcana that has come out. I'm very excited to try to cast that. I recently also learned that there is a Star Wars card game called Star Wars Unlimited that's going to be launching next year. It's going to be releasing next year. So, you know, I'm kind of taking these opportunities to like, hey, okay, I want to cast more. And it's funny because one thing that you have in the notes that we're going to get to relates to this as well. It's all tied together. It's all tied together here, Tito. One goal that I set for myself at the very beginning of this year was to cast another game that's not Hearthstone. I want to cast a second game. So this getting to cast the Masters Tour and kind of how I approached like note taking and, my approach for learning in preparation for the Masters Tour has kind of kicked off this whole like, I'm ready to dive into this in other card games too and set myself up for that. So that's been good. But on the other hand, I've also been dealing with, yet again, more like health issues and struggling and feeling sick. And after the Masters Tour, I was going to take a day or two to rest. And then the Masters Tour was also the same weekend that Disney Lorcana came out to local game stores. And I had been trying to find a store that had cards. And ultimately, it led to literally the day after the Masters Tour, I spent almost 6 hours driving to and from a store so I could get some cards. And so then I kind of put off resting. And then my body was like, no. And then right after that, I got a sinus infection that I'm on some antibiotics for. So it's been a roller coaster of the last few weeks. I'll say that.
That's fair. And yeah, you definitely have to work that rest in. You have to listen to your body, and sometimes you just can't. And like things conflict. But no, that's exciting, and it was great to see you there. My time this weekend was Labor Day weekend, and I spent time with my family. We went to the beach. My son had his first soccer practice. Me, my oldest son, and my youngest son, we beat the Ender Dragon for the first time together in Minecraft. So that was like a big moment for my 9-year-old. He was super excited, and he's been playing with his big brother, who is they typically haven't had a peek behind the curtain, a great relationship, because my oldest son is autistic, and having a much younger kid was difficult. And now that we've been able to bond through Minecraft, they're starting to play together a little bit and interact a little bit more and be able to have conversations, and it's been kind of nice. Aside, so just basic weekend things. I did have a weird moment today, and this was really weird for me. It probably isn't going to hit anybody else the way it hits me, but so I picked up my kid who had his first day of 4th grade today. And he was telling me about there's a girl, Veronica, in his class, and it's not the same Veronica that's in his Taekwondo class. So, of course, I get the Elvis Costello song, Veronica, stuck in my head. Within 30 seconds, I get a text from my friend Peter, who says that he has been listening to Elvis Costello, and he thinks it's kind of the poor man's version of Joe Jackson. But the fact that I had a Elvis Costello pop into my head for this very reason, and then all of a sudden somebody texts me about Elvis Costello, it just blew my mind as like, that is not coincidence. It's coincidence, but like, how does that happen? And I don't know. It just kind of freaked me out, like in a good way. It's just kind of weird. But anyway, Dawn, I think I'm getting a little hungry. I think it's time for some appetizers here. Now, normally when we have a guest on, we do an interview. We're not going to interview Dawn every time we have her on, because you know who she is. You know Dragonrider. You know where she comes from. You know she's on Doctor 3. You know she's on the TCC Roundtable. You know she is the head of Amberflight Gaming. You know what she does. So instead, we're going to add kind of an additional subtopic today. So our main topic today is the mental game, and more about like how you control your emotions and how to deal with tilt and how to recognize things. So we'll get into that afterwards. But we are coming up on a year of doing this podcast, which is I've been creating content for about a year now, and I think it's on the 17th will be a year since we posted our first episode. I'm very excited about that. So in our first episode, we talked about setting goals, and I figured we could kind of revisit the subject here a little bit, not necessarily about how to set your goals, but kind of the results of setting goals, because it's one thing to say, hey, I want to do this, but what happens when you accomplish that? What happens if you don't accomplish that? How important it is. So let's start here. Dawn, what are your current in-game Hearthstone goals?
Yeah, I think currently my in-game Hearthstone goals is kind of just to really kind of just focus on leveling up my game. And that means for me, the kind of competitive aspect, as I mentioned earlier, right? I'm playing in like a Battlegrounds team thing. I'm playing in 4 different series for THL every week. So for me, it's not just about like playing games. It's more about focusing on how I'm learning, how I'm approaching games, and that kind of focus, which is not really related to like rank or climbing or anything like that. So it's kind of interesting to approach the game that way.
All right, fair. Now, for me, when I started doing this, I want to become a higher legend player. For the longest time, legend was the goal, and I get there, and then a lot of people tend to play scared. I was one of those. So instead of testing my mettle and trying to improve, I would do things like I would start playing meme decks because I can relax now. I can take the pedal off my foot off the pedal because I've made it to legend. Then I decided I want to take a little bit more seriously. And I've had middling success on that. And I did hit 11 stars once, and that was when I was really into the Shadow Priest and when it was really good, and I knew that deck inside and out. And it's I want to be a player that I'm playing. I want to see the names of people that I'm playing, and it's actually people that I recognize sometimes from the communities that I am in, and say, oh, I get to play against this person or that person. And that does happen occasionally, but it's not anymore. So my main goal is to just kind of become a better player. But there's auxiliary goals from that because I am trying to do content. I do some YouTube a little bit. I do some streaming. I do whatever. And in order to increase numbers, you have to be entertaining. You have to have people want to watch you for your reason. But one good draw to get people in the door, it doesn't matter how entertaining you are. If nobody is there watching, it doesn't matter. So you do also have to find ways to get people into your stream. And one way to get people into your stream is when you have a lower number in Legend, is when you are playing people that have names and you can post, hey, I played this person, or they can see in your stream, they log into your stream and, oh, you're playing Brian Kibler, or you're playing, Meaty, or whoever it might be, whatever, World 8. And it's one of those things where each can feed the other. So that's kind of my secondary goal. And it's not as important as first goal. My first goal is I want to just have fun, but increase my level of play, because winning is fun. And that's what I want to do. So, Dawn, how do you plan on achieving the goals that you have set?
So this is the trickiest part, I think, especially when you have a goal very much like you and I do, where it's kind of a very broad goal, right? Of just say, I want to improve. That is such a vague goal that it's really hard to measure how you actually achieve that. So for me, my kind of breakdown of that is, I want to say I'm becoming, become a better player, or focus on my competitive matches. So what I have kind of done and taken this approach is each week I have decided I want to focus on a different aspect. So, and I think that we've even talked about this in some of the episodes that I've been on before, right? In terms of getting better and learning decks, or, improving certain things. So for example, last week I said, hey, Warrior has kind of gotten popular. There's both kind of Control Warrior that had picked up, and Enrage Warrior was somewhat popular. And I just said, I want to play some more Warrior and get a little bit more comfortable playing the Warrior decks. And that was my focus. This week, my focus is looking more at the decks after the patch that hit last week. Because, last week, again, I've been dealing with all my health issues and stuff, so I haven't been as tuned in as I usually am. So this week is focusing on the top couple of decks after the patch. one of the weeks was more so just like it was already a kind of settled meta. I had already played a lot. So that week was more so just looking at feeling confident in my lineup that I was bringing for the series. So for me, I plan on achieving the goal that I set by breaking it into smaller parts, and then setting, like, those smaller parts have to be something that I can tangibly say, yes, I completed that, or no, I didn't complete that. Because if I keep having all of the parts too vague and not actually something that I can say, like, yes, I did accomplish that, then it's just going to be the same thing, right? Like, I'm not actually, where do you end? Like, you have to have some way of like saying, okay, this is where I can actually feel like I did achieve that or not. So that has kind of been my focus lately.
That's fair.
How about you, Tito?
So it's different in the goals that I had in the past, because like I'm trying to become before it was just about winning and trying to get higher numbers, and I don't getting as much as I want to get those higher numbers. I don't want to just I had the success with the priest, but that was a very contained environment. I want to get to a place where I can play any deck that is good on the meta, and I can play any deck that maybe is tier 2 or tier 3 or made up, and have more success as a Hearthstone player, where I am able to, deck knowledge is one thing, meta knowledge is one thing, but where I can just make better decisions no matter what, and just be a better Hearthstone player. And that's hard to objectify, because you want to put a number in front of it's easy to put a number in front of things, have it like, hey, I have a goal this month, a soft goal of, hey, I want to try to break top 2,000, and get there. But then it's been difficult to even get to legend this month. So then it becomes, well, sometimes the goals that you have and the difficulty achieving those can kind of have almost a feedback loop of, well, am I as good as I thought I was? Like, or am I not as good? And if I'm not as good, why am I not? This deck is supposed to be 60% win rate. Why am I playing it at a 40, or why am I 45, or why can't I figure it out? So it's different from there, where I want to, my goals may not have that end point like you were talking about, where I can point and say, okay, now I am better, but I should be able to see it like most people that consistently get to a high legend, whether it's 11 stars or 10 stars, the climb isn't really a thing. It's just kind of a stepping stone to get to, the next part of the game, and it doesn't even really matter. And that's where I need to get to. And that's kind of my goal. So I am adjusting my expectations, because again, as much as I want to achieve those lower numbers and all that, I just want to be a better Hearthstone player. And instead of worrying about the end goal, I try to focus on just each game at a time and playing better in the moment, because it doesn't matter what the aggregate of everything is if you look at one game at a time. And I know this cliche, but don't worry about, hey, I've lost the last 4 games as I'm trying to learn a new deck or whatever like that. Focus on, hey, I made good decisions here. Maybe I lost, maybe I won, but what did I do right? What did I do wrong? And how can I do it better and more consistently? So that's kind of where I'm at. So we touched on this a little bit, but when you either fail or struggle to achieve your goals in the game you set for yourself, how does it make you feel about yourself and your relationship to the game?
Well, I am going to be completely and brutally honest here. That is something that honestly, like, over the years, that has been my biggest goal, is to not let that bother me, because I do set goals for myself, and I do tend to also set very high goals for myself, big goals. And sometimes I probably set my expectations and my goals a little bit too high. And I don't kind of create that like sub goal, right? Or like the breakdown that I was talking about. for myself. So then it's almost like I'm setting myself up for failure. And very much in the past, I have let it affect me very, very negatively. Like literally to the point where I will say, I can't even hit legend. I am a terrible person. Nobody likes me. Like it just spirals. Like literally, it has defined how I feel about myself as a person because I didn't hit a certain goal or a certain rank or that. And then it starts turning into, oh, now I feel bad because I feel that way. And that just makes it worse, right? That it's like a spiral. The guilt kicks in for feeling that. So in the past, it's definitely made me feel absolutely terrible about myself. And there have been times where I thought, man, I am bad at this game. I shouldn't even be playing this. Why am I doing this? Why am I playing this game? And I had to realize that it was a kind of combination of putting very high expectations on myself and also the way that I was kind of setting goals for myself and looking at things. And I was not breaking them down into achievable, smaller parts where I could feel like, hey, even if I didn't hit like the big goal, I got partway there and like I still feel good about getting partway there, right? So definitely that has impacted me. And I think over time I have definitely worked on that. I have also been kind of stubborn, I guess, in terms of I just want to keep playing the game and like so it's almost just been like I will make it work no matter what kind of thing. So relationship to the game maybe has been very like hard-headed, I guess.
And some of that will lead into our main topic. But
yes.
So and for me, I am very competitive, but I used to play pickup basketball, and you could play basketball and you're playing with your friends and you could practically come to blows when like, you get fouled hard or something like that and you're ready to fight. But when the game's over and things are like, that's left, a day, the next day or the next time, it's no big deal. It's just a thing. For me, Hearthstone's a lot like that. Whereas like when I'm playing, I want to play and hit my goals and just win and improve and see lines better and make better decisions. But when I'm done with the game for the day or when I'm doing other things, it doesn't weigh on me. Like it kind of, now in your case, you also are making content as a career or as a job or however you want to call it sometimes, and that also adds weight to those goals and those feelings of frustration because you want to produce good content, and good content in your mind is probably winning, and that becomes frustrating. Now for me, like I sometimes, like, while I don't carry the weight outside of playing, really, it does tend to weigh on me a little bit where I am a podcast host about getting better at Hearthstone. I am a streamer, a small streamer. I'm a hobbyist streamer. I'm not trying to make a living out of it or anything like that. But I have fun. But when I'm struggling, like right this week, when I'm having a hard time just hitting legend, where I feel like I should be able to get to legend without a problem. That's where it kind of weighs on me as like, well, I'm kind of a fraud sometimes. And like, am I a fraud? Am I not good at this game? Like, should I even be doing some of the stuff? And then it's like, well, no, yes, you should. You put the effort in, you put the work in. You have struggles, but the people come watch. We've actually had some pretty good increasing numbers on our people are listening to us a little bit more. So we appreciate all you new listeners out there. But it's easy to get in your own head about these things. So would you say that setting goals helps or hurts your Hearthstone enjoyment? So we know that we've had some negativity there, but we're still setting goals. So should we be setting goals, or like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think in general that is definitely going to vary like person to person, right? And just depending on what you kind of want out of the game. If you just want to play and have fun and play whatever you want, like that's your goal then, right? Your goal is just fun and winning or losing may not matter. Whatever deck you're playing may not matter. If your goal is to try to improve with building your own decks, there's plenty of like off meta content creators and different things like that, right? That's their goal. And then there's people who want to hit legend and hit that high legend that want to compete. That's definitely more so like where I fit. But I think overall setting goals, not even just for Hearthstone, Hearthstone definitely fits in that. But for me, having goals is very important to me for everything, right? Just because it gives me something to push for, something to strive for, something to focus on. Because without that, I just don't really have direction. And I just kind of either don't do anything or, I just end up feeling like I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting a day. I'm wasting, like, what am I even doing, right? I'm just kind of like floating along in life or whatever. So for me, definitely having goals helps a lot with anything. And I think also it's important to recognize that goals can change and that is perfectly fine and also often necessary. That's definitely been my goal. My goals have changed over time, right? At first it was like, I want to reach this certain level. And then it kind of got to the point of like, okay, I just want to general improve. And, there's goals of like, I want to cast. Well, maybe I don't have to be top 10 legend like the people that are playing in the tournament I'm casting. But my goal is I want to, kind of learn from those players so that I can talk about the game, right? Like there is a difference there, but I think overall, like having a goal, having a kind of direction is very good. And for me, it has helped.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I need something to chase. And whether it's something a soft goal or something more concrete, depending if I talked about this a little bit last week, but Minecraft aside, because there's things that I target and do, and I don't know why I play that and have fun with it, but most of the games that are sandbox games, like without goals, it's like Sea of Thieves or whatever it's called. It's like, well, what's the goal? What's my end? What's the direction I'm supposed to go? It's like, well, you just go do things. Like, well, no. I want to chase things. I want to achieve goals. Like I remember hitting Legend for the first time, which was. It took me a lot longer than most people. It took me, like I said, been playing since vanilla or beta, whatever you want to call it, and open beta. And I got my first legend when we had Dragon Hunter with Rottenness Drakes and all that. So whatever meta that was, it was definitely well after a couple years. So I was proud. It took me a while, and I have now, I don't know how many times I've hit Legend. I haven't been able to keep track like Blister Guy, but I've only missed it once, and I think I missed it December in the last maybe like 18 months, 19 months, something like that. So I feel like I belong there. And that's where the frustration comes in when I don't hit that goal faster. But do you have any final advice for people on the topic of setting goals in the game of Hearthstone? Or any game, really, I guess.
I guess this kind of ties into what I was just saying before, but first of all, goals are very personal. So if you have a different goal than somebody else, that is perfectly okay. So my first piece of advice is focus on the things that you want, whether other people tell you that you can get there or not. It's what you want and what you're focusing on. It's your goal. It's not their goal, right? So just focus on the things that you want to achieve or you want to focus on to make your goals, and then be flexible with them in terms of where you are at in terms of like life or health or whatever it is that you might be dealing with, and creating sub goals and like breaking your goals down into smaller and smaller, more obtainable pieces is over the long run going to help a lot in being able to achieve your goals.
100% agree. It's with, especially with gaming goals. Remember, first off, remember it is a game. We are setting goals in a game. If it is affecting your outside life, reevaluate your goals. It should not be affecting things outside of the game. It's not healthy, and obviously to each their own. But if you are finding that your lack of success in hitting your goals in a game is causing you problems outside of that, take a step back and look at that. Now, one thing we just talked about is be ready to reevaluate those goals. Like, let's say you set yourself a goal of hitting legend this month and you never have, and you don't achieve it. Well, you can take a look. Well, did I have enough time to play? No, I only had a few hours. Or maybe I only had 4 stars and I was trying to climb from 4 stars, or whatever it might be. Well, then take a look and don't assume that because you didn't hit your goal that you failed. There may not have been a pathway to success at that point. So say, well, I made it to Diamond 10. So next month, my goal will be, I'm going to readjust. Instead of trying to hit Legend, I'm just going to try to hit Diamond 5 and get there and reevaluate. Hey, what did I have time for? And how did I work on it? And maybe even the goal is still achievable. Maybe don't change the goal, change the approach. Well, I didn't make Legend. Well, how many different decks did you play? I played 37 decks each time. And well, you're not going to have consistency there because you keep chasing a different shiny squirrel. So try to focus on maybe a couple decks or 1 deck or 2 decks. There are ways to do it. Talk to, email us, talk to people in forums and on Discord. There are so many great resources in the Coin Concede Discord, Vicious Syndicate. And there's so many good resources out there and podcasts that can help. And like, I listen to the VS report every week, and that's just a great, whether or not you necessarily take everything Zach says with, as fact. Some people do, some people don't, but it definitely gives you an idea of what the meta looks right now. So if you're saying, I can't figure out why I'm not winning, and then you listen to something like that and they say, oh yeah, well, Drum Druid happens to have a bad matchup against Warrior, and Warrior is all over the meta right now, so maybe try something else. And then maybe something will click for you saying, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Use statistics, use things, but that's kind of a tangent. Just look at your goals and reevaluate them. And it is healthy to, if you don't achieve something, it doesn't mean you failed. It means maybe you need to just change the target that you are setting. This was a lot, but yeah, this would normally be our main topic, but we still have a whole nother main topic, and I'm getting a little hungry for dinner. What do you think, Dawn?
That's all right. Let's do it.
So normally when we have Dragonrider on, and I know I keep switching back from Dragonrider to Dawn, I hope we kind of can deal with the continuality there. I reach out and say, hey, you ready to be on the show again? What's the topic? Because we've been doing these building blocks, and I think we're about ready to get on to intermediate kind of steps, and that'll be coming soon. But one thing that she has suggested this week was talking about kind of the tilt and mental handling of emotions when playing the game, which was funny to me because I had just received a text from listener Crisley Bear. And let me read that to you right now. It says, hi, I'm a fan of Bread and Butter, and I like your approach to serve the basics for Hearthstone. I'm a psychologist from Germany and often think about the, quote, right, quote, mentality for climbing the ladder. For example, how it affects emotional stress. A competitive game like Hearthstone can cause the ability of systematic thinking, and of course the results. How do I realize the stress soon enough, and how do I deal with it? The problem of being tilted. So the fact that this is something, and we've talked about this a little bit on the show, but the fact that this is almost like the whole Veronica thing again. It just happened to be perfect timing, kismet, whatever you want to call it. So, Dawn, take it away. Let's talk about some tilt.
All right. Yeah. So just a quick overview, what I kind of want to talk about here. There's some different things. So I'm going to start with talking about kind of what tilt is and some different forms of tilt. Then we'll kind of talk about how tilt can impact your play. Then we'll look at how you can maybe identify some of those, the tilt or some of those emotions. And then we'll move into like strategies on focusing on learning and improvement, or dealing with some of that tilt or emotions. So the first thing that I want to talk about is what is tilt and some different forms of tilt. Now, one resource that I absolutely love that I go back to over and over and over again is a book called The Mental Game of Poker. It's by Jared Tendler. If anybody has not heard of this book, definitely recommend it. You can find it, all over, whether you're buying a physical copy or getting it online, anything like that. But, and there's actually a second Mental Game of Poker at this point now. And Jared Tendler has also moved into writing like the Mental Game of Trading and some other stuff. But it's kind of all based on the same theories. And in the book, he actually talks about 7 different types of tilt, which is fascinating, right? Because I think in general, when people hear the word tilt or they say, I'm tilted, usually it's just like anger, right? I'm mad. Things aren't going well. And they kind of group it all together. But there are multiple forms of tilt. So I'm just going to read these kind of different, the 7 different types of tilt that Jared Tendler has in this book. That is running bad. So like a lot of, bad luck, bad RNG, a lot of that kind of all together. You have injustice tilt. So maybe your opponent top decks the 1 in 17 that they need for lethal. And yeah, you're like, that sucks. My opponent just got that, right? That's unfair. There is hate losing tilt, when you are literally so focused on wanting to win, right? You're like, I cannot lose. And that's not necessarily the problem in itself, but the problem is how you handle when you lose. And a lot of this is kind of your reaction to these things. There's also mistake tilt. I definitely have felt that in the past, where you get so mad at yourself basically for making any little mistake. You're like, oh, I made this one mistake in this game. I'm a terrible player. Shouldn't be doing this or whatever. Yeah, that's a form of tilt. On the other side, though, maybe entitlement tilt. So I have gotten legend the last 24 months in a row. I am a legend player. I deserve to get there. I cannot believe that I am losing. I need to be winning. I am a better player than these people. Yeah, that's a form of tilt. It absolutely is. Even though it's not maybe getting mad at the RNG or bad RNG, right? It's kind of the other side. You're like, I deserve to have this. Or in that same vein, maybe you're doing really well, right? You win a whole bunch. You're like, I deserve to keep winning. Then, sorry.
I think your dog is tilted.
Yeah. Here's a motorcycle outside. Then there is revenge tilt, which he describes as like disrespect or constant aggressive action, opponents thinking they're better than you are. Yeah, just, like, oh, okay. Like, oh, or maybe it's, oh, well, that last opponent just beat me and they were a terrible player. I can't believe that. So like, I'm just going to beat up on this next person. Revenge tilt. And then there's also desperation tilt. In terms of poker, that's like the urge to win your money back, right? But in Hearthstone, that could be stars. You can relate that, right? You're like, oh, well, I was, I hear this kind of thing a lot. Well, I was Diamond 3, or I was Diamond 2, or I was Diamond 1. I was almost Legend, and now I'm all the way back to Diamond 5, and I have to keep playing. I have to get those stars back. I have to get that rank back. Or if you're in Legend, right, like, and you drop some rank, oh, I gotta get that rank back, and that's a form of tilt because you're so focused on the aspect of that rank, that possession, right? Instead of focusing on the play itself of each game. So that's what tilt is, and some different forms of tilt. And I I would be curious to see how many of you kind of realized that there are different forms of tilt rather than just like the angry, like, oh, I'm mad because right, bad RNG. I don't know how you have heard of this before, right, Tito, of this book, Mental Game of Poker.
Yeah, I've heard of the book, and it's kind of funny. I've never read it, and I didn't realize how many different kinds of tilt there were. But I will say, just probably a month or two ago, I went on a super losing streak that day, and I had posted like it was comically bad. Like I was like 2-22 or something stupid, but I wasn't upset. I was just playing the games, and I was kind of like, all right, well, I lost, and like I didn't feel tilted, but I had posted that like the people a bit were like, why are you still playing right now? Take a break, step away. I'm like, well, I'm not upset. It's like, yeah, but you're still tilted. Like you may not feel tilted, but like clearly something is not right, because even just bad variance would never get you to that point, really. And I wasn't like, that'll happen if you're playing like, hey, I'm trying to make this weird deck work, or I'm not talking like if you're trying to make something weird happen, or you're trying to build a deck, that's one thing. But when like you're playing meta decks and you're just losing, and even if you don't feel angry, like if you're going on a little bit of a losing streak, it's hard to do if you're streaming or something like that. But even if you are, try to change something up. Like take a step away, get a drink of water, stretch. And recognize that maybe even if you don't feel angry, that you are tilted. But so I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So how does tilt affect your play, Dawn?
Well, as you mentioned, I mean, you can even be tilted sometimes without realizing you're tilted, and then that does start to impact your play. And sometimes it impacts your play without you realizing it, which is the most tricky thing that can happen. Absolutely. But, if you are, obviously, if you're kind of I will say the typical, quote unquote, typical tilt, right, that people kind of customly think of when they think of tilt, right? Like anger, oh, this is going so badly. Then obviously your emotions are kind of in control, and you're probably just going to start playing cards without really thinking through the plays. Or maybe you're just going to say, oh, I just need to play this thing. I just need to play the biggest thing. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now of course my opponent has the clear, and now my big thing is gone. And then it kind of leads into more errors, more of that. And you're kind of just repeating the same thing. So what ends up happening is you let these thoughts disrupt your focus, and you're looking at the plays without the attached emotion, right? So you start to play with your emotions as the first barrier, instead of letting your thinking and the process of how you want to play impact your play.
It's kind of like if you are playing in your little, maybe you've lost a few games and you're like, well, I'm just going to play these cards up, but of course they're going to have Brawl. And then they have Brawl. And you're like, yeah, see, instead of saying, well, if they have Brawl, maybe I should play something different. Maybe I should try to think about how I play around it. And so, yeah, there's definitely different levels there if you really think about it.
Yeah. And, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, it can, even if you're on the other side, right? Like if you've gone on a huge win streak, that can impact your play. I have definitely been there. And that was also before I even, had read the Mental Game of Poker, heard about it. Several years back, Jared Tendler was actually a guest on the Coin Concede podcast. And that episode is still one of my absolute favorite episodes of a card game podcast ever. Definitely recommend going and listening to that. Because these concepts, it doesn't matter what kind of meta it is, right? It doesn't matter if you're playing an aggro deck or control deck. It doesn't matter what cards are popular, what decks are popular. These concepts transcend all of that, right? So you can apply these concepts and these ideas no matter what the meta is, no matter what deck you're playing. And I will say that I have a story. There was the month that I was first trying to push Legend. And I, like you, had played since open beta. So I was playing in like January of 2014, right? I didn't hit Legend for the first time until several years into the game, when I had really been like focusing on it, pushing. I, reached out for coachings, all sorts of stuff. And it was in a Murloc Paladin meta. And I'd been just playing a ton of Murloc Paladin. And literally in the same month that I hit Legend for the first time, I had a day that I had an 8% win rate, according to my deck tracker. And yes, single digit, 8, not 18, not 28%, 8% win rate. So clearly, as you had said, right, that's a little bit more than just like bad RNG, right? Like my opponents were not getting that lucky. I was clearly tilted and was not realizing it. So I had an 8 because I just kept playing, right? I'm like, oh, well, this is just bad. Obviously, I just need to keep playing games and I'll get through this bad luck, right? That was my thought. Like, I'll just keep jamming game. Eventually, the bad luck will end and I'll just start winning. But in doing...
How many times do you just pick up a new deck and you start off like 8-1 and then you look up and you're like, I'm 20-20 or 20-24. You're like, what the heck just happened? Like, I thought I had this deck figured out. I thought I found the deck and it just...
Yeah. And it's, like I said, it's so easy to all of a sudden, you look at that and you're like, what happened? I don't even know what happened. Or then you just start thinking, oh, well, it was just, man, every game my opponents got really lucky, or the RNG, or all of my, all of those games, my draws were just terrible and I couldn't do anything. But, it's going to happen. It's going to happen in some games. Variance is definitely in impacting. But, I'm going to say that all of this, whether you realize it or not, can absolutely impact your play. And this is where we start getting into the, okay, well, if it is impacting, how can you start to identify that you are, dealing with this, and start to identify where you're kind of hitting those tilt issues. So I'll say for me, one really strong indicator for me that I have learned over time is that typically I don't even pay attention to when my opponent uses an emote. If my opponent is like roping, or if they're saying something and they're like, whatever, the pleasure is mine, the pleasure is mine, the pleasure is mine, like repeatedly, most of the time, I completely ignore it. I'm not even looking at their portrait because I'm so focused on like, okay, here's my hand, here's what's going on in the game. I'm thinking about my play. I'm thinking about what they want to do. I'm thinking about cards in my deck. But I have noticed, when I start going, oh, shut up, and I just start like squelching them and I start getting irritated that they're emoting, that's when I know I am tilted, because normally it doesn't bother me. So my first piece of advice is try to identify your kind of base. So like identify, hey, if I'm playing well, or if I really feel focused, maybe write down how you think you play, or things that if other people bring it up, because that's happened to me, right? Like on stream, and people are like, oh my God, I can't believe they're emoting so much. And I go, what? They've been emoting? Because I didn't even notice it, right? Because I was so focused on like my plays. So if there is something that other people bring up that you're like, oh, that doesn't even bother me, or I don't think about that, I don't focus on that, that could be a good indicator of something that you're doing well, right? That you want to put as like your base. And then as soon as you start to drift from that, that could be a really good indicator that you are tilted, or you're letting, the emotions of the RNG or something else really get to you. Do you have anything like that, Tito?
Yeah, I have a couple things. I noticed once, one thing I did think of is I remember I was watching a streamer that I liked, and they were clearly tilted. And I mentioned that in chat, and they got super angry about it, because it's like, well, if you're reacting that badly to someone just saying, hey, you might be a little tilted, maybe you should, whatever. It's like, yeah, I don't need you to tell me anything like that. I was like, okay, I'm like, and it was one of those streamers. It's not like a big streamer. It's a streamer that I'm friends with and all that. And eventually they came back and apologized to me because they were like, sorry. I mean, I guess I was tilted, but for me, I noticed when it's turn 3 and I just realized, hey, what is my opponent even playing? What class? Because I didn't notice. Because I'm just so kind of like, well, grumble, play. Wait, okay, so wait, I don't even have a plan because I haven't even thought about what my opponent is playing. So that is a pretty good indication. I would say one good thing to do possibly is if you get tilted, or everyone gets tilted. Let me correct that. 99.9% of us get tilted. I don't think Dog gets tilted, but I think everyone else gets tilted. So figure out maybe a break point. Like, you know how you have in a snowplow, you have a shear pin that breaks when things get stuck? Set yourself kind of a shear pin of like, hey, if I lose 3 in a row, let me just get up and walk and think. Or let me look at the last replay. Let me take a minute to look at my last replay and slowly go through it and say, well, what could I have done differently here? And maybe you'll see like, oh, I'm like making the snap decision here where I probably could have done this. So I recommend, not that I follow this. This is me, do as I say, not as I do, I guess. And I need to actually do this a little more often, is set a point where, hey, if you lose X number of games in a row, whether it's 3, whether it's 5, whatever you're comfortable with, stop and say, okay, what's wrong? And it could be just bad variance. It could be just a losing streak. These things do happen. You can lose 5 in a row, even if you're playing well, but you're still going to get tilted. So step away, find that sweet spot for you to kind of like, okay, even if I don't notice my symptoms, something's amiss. Something's rotten in the state of Denmark, and give yourself that opportunity. How about yourself? What else do you do?
Yeah. So definitely you can try to recognize those kind of things on your own, but also if you do have somebody else that you can lean on to help you recognize those things, that can be helpful, because sometimes we can, especially when we get angry or we just let those emotions control what we're thinking, even if it's, whether it's anger, whether it's like a kind of depression, like guilt kind of things, all of those emotions can get out of control really, really quickly. So I have another story, and, even more recently, I'll say a lot of people will like watch my stream and they're like, wow, you just never you don't get tilted. And it's like, I do. But for me, I had a very, very impactful moment. And I think this was maybe around the time I was trying to hit legend for the first time, or somewhere around then, maybe a little bit after, because I'd been so focused on that goal, right? Of like, I need to hit this and I need to do well. And like everything hinged on it for me. And I would get so angry at like the losing. I would feel, I would take that like personally, right? I would soak it into myself. Like, I'm a terrible person. I this, right? Whatever it was. And I would start to take that outside of the game. And it led to the point where like, I was just an angry person. People didn't want to be around me. And it got to the point, it was so bad. Like all of this was controlling me so much that it got to the point where my husband was like, you need to either stop playing the game or you have to like change your attitude about this, because he's like, it's literally affecting our marriage and like our relationship and your relationship with other people. Like it is that bad. And I had not realized that it was that bad, or I hadn't realized kind of the spiral that it had created, right? The tilts in game, and then I'd be angry outside of the game, and then I'd take whatever anger I had outside of the game and I'd bring it into the game, and then it just, it was like a ride that you just couldn't get off, right? It's like a roller coaster that just kept going around and around and around, and I couldn't get off until finally somebody else hit the emergency stop button and was like, hey, whoa, like, stop, you gotta stop. And at that point, just like we were talking about with the goals, right? I had to reassess. I had to reanalyze and say, well, I do really love Hearthstone. I want to be good at this game. I want to play, but also, wow, I cannot let a game or these emotions that I'm playing control everything. And also it gets to the point where, kind of like you were saying with, pointing out to the streamer and stuff, when people start then taking it into other aspects, or if you're somebody who is letting something like your opponent top decking, a 1 in 17 in a card game literally affect your entire day, something small like that, what other things are affecting you that you don't even realize? And when I started thinking about stuff like that, I'm like, if I'm letting something like this bother me, what happens when something actually important or actually big happens? I am probably like an out of control monster at that point, and nobody wants to be around me. I'm ruining relationships. I'm potentially ruining like a job or other things, like just because I am not controlling how I'm reacting to these situations. And that's what this all comes down to, right? Is sometimes you just have to identify and say, I'm not reacting to this well, or I don't like how I'm reacting to this. So then you have to change it. So for me, that was like the very first big, recognition, I guess, was somebody else pointing it out to me and being like, hey, you have to stop. And then after that, then I said, okay, well, obviously this is something that is impacting me a lot. So then I took the approach of, I need to think about my response to anything and everything that happens in the game, right? Whether it was good or bad. Because as we've talked about, even the good stuff, right? So if I was winning a lot, like you mentioned, it's a really good example, winning a lot, and then all of a sudden I started losing, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. And then it'd be like, well, wait, now if I look at my win record, though, like I still have like a 70% win rate. That's really good. Why am I upset at like this one loss? And it was because I felt like I deserved to keep winning because I was doing so well, right? So then it's kind of like, oh, okay, all right. Just stop right there. Like, okay, don't let that get to you. And I also used to be somebody who was very focused on the win rate as well, right? Like after every single game, I would look at my deck tracker and be like, oh, okay, now I'm at a 2-2. Okay, next game. Okay, I'm at 3-2. Okay, I'm winning. I could do this, And then the next game would be like, or a couple games later, oh crap. Well, now I'm 3-5. Oh, I just suck at this. Like, hold on. Plus that's a really small sample size. I know we've talked about that, but literally I was so focused on the winning or the losing, I didn't even remember the games and how I even got to the winning or losing.
Yep. And there's like anxiety tilt there too. Like,
yeah.
So I know even when I'm playing well and I'm like, Diamond 5, Diamond 4, Diamond 3, Diamond 2 stars, I lost. It's like, okay, my momentum, did I just lose my momentum? I was climbing. It's like, no, it's just one loss. It's variance. It's going to happen. And one thing we talked a little bit about, but tilt just doesn't come from the game. You can bring tilt to the game. So you had a bad day at work. You had a fight with your significant other. Traffic was bad. It's hot out. The dog has been barking for a while. Whatever it is, if you have these emotions affecting you, that could, if you don't recognize that, you're going to come into the game, you might start losing immediately and then really kind of start to feel tilted even more of that. So recognize where you're ready to play. And let's say you want to unwind and play Hearthstone, but you also know that you're tilted already. Like you came in, I'm frazzled from work and I want to relax and play some Hearthstone. Maybe play Battlegrounds, maybe play Duels, maybe play Arena, do something that's Hearthstone related, but not necessarily that if you have a goal of hitting Legend and you're coming in tilted, don't further exasperate the situation by then losing because you're tilted. Even if maybe you don't lose, but you're giving that opportunity to yourself to raise the level of tilt that you're experiencing. You're just going to get worse and worse. So try to recognize that. And if you feel like you really want to do it, give it a go. But if like you lose a couple games, say, okay, well, I'm clearly not in a headspace for this. Let's move on to something else. And there's other things. So, overall, there's a lot, and we got kind of deep here. You got any final thoughts there, Don?
Yeah, I do. I think that, you bring up a really good point as well, with like outside factors. And I think in terms of trying to actually like break down strategies rather than just like, oh, I need to identify stuff or, have somebody else identify things, focus on where it is that you might be struggling. Like I said, if you come in and you're like, oh, it's been a long day of work and you want to unwind and then you sit down and you play, but you're kind of zoned out, you're tired, maybe you're hungry, you need to like eat something so that your brain can actually have something to, fuel it. I've heard people, and this also goes back and forth, right? Either like the quote unquote good or quote unquote bad, something like adult beverages. Some people are like, oh, I play so much better when I'm drunk, or I play way worse when I'm drunk. Well, there's a reasoning below that for that, right? If you are somebody who plays better after you've been having drinks, try to think about why that is, right? It's probably because you're like letting loose in a way, right? You're not focused necessarily on the same things. So if you've been drinking and you play worse, then it's probably because you're not focused like you normally are, right? But like, try to dig deeper into the reasons of like why the thing could be happening and work your way deeper and deeper. Just as we talked about with goals, start breaking it down further and further into like smaller and smaller pieces. And then you can that will help you recognize what is happening and you'll start to catch it sooner and sooner, right? So then you can actually say, oh, okay, I'm getting tilted because I am not handling the bad RNG well. Or I'm getting tilted because I was doing really well with the deck and then all of a sudden I didn't do well, right? So those strategies of just kind of breaking it all down, digging deeper into why, and then identifying it, that should all really help. And my final thought here is it's going to take time, just like goals. It's not an overnight thing. It's going to take time. For different people, that's going to mean different lengths of time. For me, it meant years. And it's something that I still focus on and I still work on consistently.
I always bowled better between beer 2 and beer 3. It's just how it was. So, I can feel that. Now, just keep in mind, too, that the two topics we had today are also related. You can get tilted from not hitting your goals or struggling to hit your goals. So keep an eye on, like, if you are getting tilted because you like, and this happens to me, I get tilted when I'm struggling to hit legend, when I really want to be doing is improving my legend. Recognize that and then adjust, because maybe you need to adjust your goals or maybe you need to adjust your approach. So they're very intertwined, and
absolutely.
And but Dawn, this has been a deep conversation, and I really appreciate it. It's been very interesting, and I love the chat about it. But I'm kind of full. I think there's a little bit room for dessert, though. What do you think?
Yeah, let's get into something more sweet now after the heaviness.
Dear listener, it's been a while since we've had a review. We'd love to hear from you. It helps other people find the show, and we want people to find the show. We want to talk to everybody. Like that last segment, and actually both segments, I'm sure a couple times you were nodding your head saying, yep, that's me. Yep, I hear that. I see myself right there. And if we can help out anybody, we just had Doc's brother on last week, who's just starting out in Hearthstone. And if we can help anybody you can help them find us. And that helps you, that helps me, that helps everybody. So I know it's a little bit of a hassle trying to find that, but if you can leave us a review in your podcast catcher of choice, I think iTunes is like the gold standard, but it's kind of a pain in the butt to get to. So we'd appreciate it. Now, we covered the topic of setting goals, which is something we covered in episode 1. I thought, given that we were almost at a year, it was a good idea. There's only so many topics we're going to be able to cover as an educational podcast where we're trying to improve our game. There's a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of overlap. And we're going to have people on talking about Hunter again. We're going to have people here. I'm sure we're going to talk about Tilt again in like 2 years, because nobody's going to go through the entire back catalog to re-listen to things. And we may have different expectations or different ideas or different points of view on some of these in a year later. So we will have, some repeat topics. If you have something that, even if we've talked about, you'd like us to revisit, let us know. You can let us know on Twitter. You can let us know on email. You can email us at breadandbutterhs@gmail.com. But, some things are going to come back around again, and hope you guys appreciate it. And if there's anything that we talk about too much, let us know too. I don't think we revisit anything too much. Except for deck building. I know we've had quite a few episodes on deck building, but I don't think we can get enough episodes. I think if we had an episode a week on deck building, there's room for that there. So, Dawn, what we've already talked about your breakfast. I believe we've talked about your favorite dessert. So, what is your go-to style of music for either getting ready to maybe work out or do something physical, or even just do something mental? Like what music pumps you up?
So this is a very good question, and I thought a lot about this earlier after you shared the show notes with me. And I think ultimately it came down to, I don't want to say like it varies, but it can. But the style of music that I really use for getting ready is some kind of music that is going to make me feel something. How's that? Like, for sometimes that means I've been struggling. Maybe I've been upset. And, sometimes that means like, I just need a really like sad song that I could just like belt, that I could just be like, get my emotions out with the singing. Sometimes that means I need something fun and just upbeat and like goofy, that like, maybe I don't necessarily sing all the words because I'm trying to do my makeup and I can't can't really like sing and dance along while I'm trying to do my makeup. That doesn't really work. So for me, it's very like related to my kind of emotional state, or the emotional state that I'm trying to get myself into.
Fair enough. My choice, if I'm going to start running, I like Pull Me Under by Dragon Force. Or, I think it's Dragon Force. I like it because it has a nice, slow, steady beat that kind of picks up and kind of crescendos. It feels like a nice easing into an exercise. So there's that. Listener, I know I was just talking to you a minute ago. I'm going to talk to you one more time. We're looking to occasionally maybe bring on, we've had some amazing guests. Like I said, I always say we punch above our weight. Like, we have some excellent, well-spoken guests on all kinds of different topics. One thing I would like to do is I'd like to start bringing on some smaller content creators or pros or Hearthstone players that maybe aren't as well known, that maybe you like to watch, that maybe only have a small amount of viewership and they're not well known. Not that we're going to give them a big bump, but hopefully we can expose them and get some traction and get some more people into the streams. I can tell you, Smarms was a smaller streamer and she got on Blizzlet, and things have just gone out of control from there for her. So I think just having someone new on and maybe getting them a little extra exposure could be fun. So if you have somebody that you'd like to suggest, let us know and we'll see what we can do. Dragonrider, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, I am in a lot of different places. If you're interested in Twitter, you can find me there at DawnieDK. That's DAWNIEDK. You can find me both on Twitch and YouTube, Dragonrider TCCG, or dragonridertccg.com for my website. You can find a bunch of stuff. And Tito mentioned this earlier, but I also do several podcasts. Every week you can hear me on the Doctor 3 HS podcast. We focus on standard Hearthstone and like climbing the ranked ladder. And also every week on my YouTube channel, and I'm getting caught up on getting the audio versions out for those. But the TCCG Roundtable, we go over a bunch of different news, competitive tournaments that are happening, and an in-depth topic like we did on this episode, but for card games as a whole. So we cover, potentially up to like 10, 12 different card games, sometimes all in a single episode of a TCCG Roundtable. So if you're interested in a bunch of card games, then check that one out.
And you do that one with Ron Mexico, who has never starred in an adult movie. You can also find Doc McButt on Twitter and Twitch at Doc McButt. I should say Twitter. He says he streams, but I'll believe it when I see it again. You can find me at Tito Santana HS on both Twitter and Twitch. Dawn, do you have any shout outs this week?
Yes, of course. First shout out definitely has to go to, both of you. I know Doc wasn't able to be here today, but, I always love being able to get on the show with both of you, talk about these in-depth topics. And yeah, as we're kind of moving, I think this is probably the segment that kind of transcends like the basics, the basic building block into more like intermediate, advanced kind of topics. So it's a good like segment, segue segment, I guess. Let's try saying that 5 times fast. Ain't gonna be me. But I always love coming on here and talking about these things. I mentioned earlier, I love the casting. I love digging into these things more in depth like this. And sometimes I don't feel like I really get the chance to do that when I'm just like live streaming and playing. So I absolutely love doing this repeatedly. So thank you to you guys for having me on. And he also mentioned, my Ron Mexico host for TCCG Roundtable, but I got to give a special shout out to Alkaline Cat and Send Me Your Arms or Smarms over at the Dr. 3 podcast, because man, I feel like the last couple of months, like I have been dealing with so many health issues, and they have just been so flexible and so understanding through all of that. So sometimes I don't get to record with them, or we kind of switch things around in terms of when we're recording or who's editing, and they have been very flexible. So huge shout out to them for that.
And I believe it's either Smarms, Send Me Your Arms, or Send Me Your Arms, no, literally cut them off and send them to me. I believe those are her 3 names.
Correct.
And today I'm just going to shout out the listeners, all you out there, because there's more of you. And I like I said, we've been doing this for about a year now, and it's great to have, you find some loyal fans. That fans might be the wrong word, but you find some loyal listeners that stick by you when you're not as good at doing this thing and you're improving. In fact, like we just figured out some audio issues a few weeks ago, and hopefully all the we now sound more like a real podcast. And I've had folks that I've been on the show, or that I've potentially been trying to get on the show, that says, "Oh, I listened to the last episode. It sounds really professional, and you guys seem like you know what you're doing, and it's a lot of fun." And the fact that we're getting feedback like that and seeing the numbers increase is important, because we're not doing this to become, we're not doing this for the money. We're not doing this for the fame. There are dozens of you out there listening to us, and we appreciate it. But the more people we can reach, the more fun it is, because you're building up that community, you're building up that connection, and that's what this is really all about. This is talking to people, even if you're not talking back, and hopefully we hear from you, and hopefully you love it. But anyway, I think we're toast. We'll see ya.
Bye.
Slide two brothers meet one another when they slide up to the mic. It's bread and butter with one another. Let's start up that recording light.